So good morning, everyone. My name is Kim DeLellis, as Lori mentioned, and I am with the Center for Workforce Information, a bureau within the Department of Labor and Industry. For those of you who don't know us, here's a slide that just describes a little about who we are. I'm not going to read it to you today. The long and short of it is we are the labor market information shop for the state of Pennsylvania. So if you have any questions regarding workforce or economic statistics, we are your go-to individuals. We are a group that is funded by the federal government to provide these services for the low cost of absolutely nothing to you. So we encourage you to take advantage of the data, products, and resources that we make available. In many cases, we have data readily available on our website, which is provided there for you. But in the off chance you're not finding what you're looking for, or you have a question about the data that is there, we do have a customer service section available via phone or email that can help point you in the right direction, or even possibly find you data that is not readily available on our website. So I encourage you, if you're working through any of your projects or analysis on your end, we are a great resource to start with. For those of you who have not been out to our website, this is generally what it looks like. At the top, there's a very large bar, carousel bar that actually you can scroll through. It highlights our most recent additions or updates to the website. It happens that the first thing being updated right now is the 26th edition of our Pennsylvania Career Guide, and we will be talking about that in a little bit. The easiest way to navigate through our website is to go to the products A to Z section, which is circled with the red circle in the middle of the page. As one might suspect, it is an alphabetical listing of all of our available products, which include both data and actual publications and tools. So it is a comprehensive one-stop location that serves as a good starting point for you to see just the wealth of information that is available. And once again, we have included the website there for reference purposes. If you do click on products A to Z, not surprisingly, you will get that alphabetical listing of our products. And we are doing our best to relabel these products so that they are useful and easy to find as we engage with our customers. I've marked 6 items there with green arrows that we're going to cover a little bit on today. We have career information, so our occupational wages and our occupational projections, a little further down in that second column, serve as the cornerstone and key data sets that allow us to look at the employment outlook for occupations, how many people work in those occupations now, how that's going to change over time, what the annual demand might be, and then occupational wages, because the 2 questions we get asked most often regarding occupations is, will there be jobs for me available when I complete the required educational component, and what kind of wages can I expect to earn? There are more than 800 different classifications of occupations, so looking at the raw data sets can sometimes be overwhelming. So we've created many reports and tools that are useful in looking at that data and whittling down that list to a more reasonable and manageable volume of information for research purposes. And we're going to cover those just briefly today. A couple things to keep in mind, and these are common questions, assumptions, clarifications that we have to make when individuals are using our data. Our center does collect data both by industry and by occupation. And while it seems like it should be a logical distinction of what the 2 are, there is a lot of confusion as to which is which. So for purposes of everything we're discussing here today, industries refer to the businesses or organizations where the individual works. So things like hospitals, manufacturing facilities, construction companies. The occupation refers to the specific job duties that the individual is performing. So this would be things like secretary, carpenter, registered nurse. All of our occupational data does follow the Federal Standard Occupational Classification, or SOC structure. So there's a hierarchy that goes from a very broad major grouping of occupations like office and administrative support, and then gradually works its way down as that 6-digit code adds more numbers and less zeros. It becomes more and more specific. So you can drill down to something as specific as a bookkeeper. This classification system is similar to, but not exactly the same as what is used in ONET. And I know a lot of individuals are familiar with the ONET website. The ONET website is put together by our federal partners, and so there is a lot of crossover. We are big users of ONET as well, and it's nice that there is a connection, but ONET is able to drill down to a finer detail of occupation than our data can. So just keep that in mind as you're looking. Within ONET, there might actually be separate breakouts for bookkeeper, accounting clerk, and auditing clerk from the example above. As we're talking about our primary data sets, our occupational projections and wages, one thing to keep in mind is we're talking about individuals working in that occupation regardless of the industry they are working in or across all industries. So when we talk about a cashier, we're talking about that cashier equally regardless of whether they happen to work in retail, healthcare, food service. A cashier is a cashier when it comes to our occupational data. This allows us to get a more comprehensive look of what the employment opportunities and wages are for individuals with those common skill sets. And the other thing to keep in mind as we're looking at information is we do provide a lot of information by minimum education attainment level. This allows individuals to get an idea of just how much education, training, or experience they might need in order to enter an occupation. These levels are determined at the federal level, and we use them just to group occupations to provide a little bit of understanding in terms of, am I going to have to go to school for 4 years? Can I enter this job fresh out of high school? So with that, I wanted to touch very briefly on the two main data sets that we talked about, our occupational employment projections and then our occupational wages. Our occupational employment projections are available every 2 years. The current iteration that is out there is projected to run through 2028. Next year, we will be releasing data that is projections through 2030. It reflects an estimate of the jobs, not people. So if a person has more than one job, they are counted for each job that they do have. And we produce this information based on partnerships with our federal partners, go figure, that allow us to compare this data from state to state. So not only do we have this information for Pennsylvania, you will be able to find it for neighboring states or other states if that is of interest to you to allow for comparisons. In addition to our national and statewide data that is available, the state of Pennsylvania also produces data at sub-state regions of metropolitan statistical areas, which are largely focused around the urban sections of Pennsylvania. And more importantly, our workforce development areas that cover all 67 counties within the Commonwealth. So there is data that is localized to your area. It may be single county, or it may include multiple counties, but it is at least more localized than statewide data. So you get an idea of what's happening in your local area as opposed to the state, because believe it or not all portions of Pennsylvania have the same occupational needs and outlook. So for each set of data that is produced, you will find a file similar to the example that is included here. For each occupation, and again, that hierarchy that we referred to earlier would be showcased here. We provide an outlook, an estimate of how many people are currently employed in the occupation, how that's going to change in that 10-year outlook, which allows for a percentage change or growth rate. Growth rate is something that people tend to focus on because it suggests that there's a lot of positive activity going on. You will see that there are occupations that actually have a negative % change or a constriction in the number of people expected for that occupation. However, what's important to note actually takes us to the final 4 columns, and that is just because something is growing or something is declining, it does not mean that there is not a need for those workers. When we talk about occupations, there is normal churn within an occupation. People come, people go. It's changing almost on a daily basis and definitely on an annual basis. So we need to have some idea of not only how many new workers we might need for that occupation, but how many workers we might need to replace those who are leaving the workforce altogether and those who are transferring to other occupations. Hence the breakout of our total annual demand, or that final column being shown there, into 3 different categories of demand due to growth, demand due to exits, and demand due to transfers. If you look at any of the occupations listed there, you'll see that the numbers for annual demand due to exits and due to transfers are much higher than the annual demand due to growth. In reality, industry growth or expansion, or even in some cases contraction, is a very, very small contributor to the overall need for individuals working in an occupation. The example I always like to use, and unfortunately the screen is only so big so I can't show the data here, there is a lot of focus on occupations related to information technology or IT jobs. And IT jobs are very important to the Commonwealth. They pay very well. There's a lot of opportunities available to individuals, and there's a lot of interest, especially among younger workers, to go into those fields. However, in reality, when you look at the total demand for computer occupations, it is actually lesser in quantity than our need for production occupations or occupations found in the manufacturing sector. And the manufacturing sector has been steady or in decline for numerous years now. So it's always important to not only look at the number that is being shown, the demand that is available, the projected employment numbers, but also how that compares to similar jobs to make sure that you're making informed career decisions. And again, this information is available for the state and those sub-state geographies, so you can see how things are performing differently in your local area. With that, I wanted to share this slide because this is always entertaining. There's a common statement floating around out there that appeared in a report probably about a decade or so ago now that said 60% of the jobs in the future will require a 4-year degree. And it's a very misleading statistic because it's based simply on those 800 occupational classifications. It does not take into account the employment found within those occupations. When you think about that, there are a lot more people performing and working in jobs like cashiers, food service, clerical work. These are jobs that, tend to be those entry-level fields that a lot of people go into. A lot of part-time work also occurs. So there's a lot more jobs and employment in those jobs that are lower skilled than there are in those jobs that require a 4-year degree. So when you factor in the actual employment in those fields, this is a more realistic representation of the educational breakout of jobs in our current employment sector. So we have the jobs of today, tomorrow, and the future. And just to clarify, these are jobs that today you can walk out and enter into. The jobs of tomorrow are going to be those jobs that require some post-secondary education, be it an apprenticeship, a 2-year degree, a certification program, something along those lines where it's not a full 4-year degree, but it's going to be something beyond high school and or on-the-job training. And finally, our jobs of the future, those that do require a 4-year degree, bachelor's degree, or higher. As you'll see, when you factor in employment to those classifications, we still have more than 50% of our current employment base working in jobs that are available to individuals straight out of high school. In most cases, nothing beyond a high school diploma or GED is required to enter most of these jobs. And within 1 year of working in those jobs, people are considered fully prepared to perform that work. It is worth noting that this segment is steadily declining. It's going to grow at a much slower pace than the other ones and the state overall, and it has been steadily creeping down toward that 50% mark for several years now. The growth is actually occurring in that next bucket, the jobs of tomorrow. So it's not surprising that there's a lot of focus on jobs that have formal certification, portable credentials, maybe a formal apprenticeship, and ultimately a completion of associate's degree. A lot of jobs of the past where you could walk into them out of high school now require at least some amount of either training to enter and or training to continue or advance through them as your career progresses. So we're seeing a lot of growth occurring in that middle bucket, those jobs of tomorrow. And as you can see, we're seeing above average growth expected for most of that segment as well. And then finally, we do have those jobs of the future. And by no means are we saying that jobs requiring a 4-year degree do not exist out there. But in reality, 1 out of every 4 jobs is actually going to require a bachelor's degree or higher when you factor in the number of individuals working in them. This has remained pretty consistent over the years. It has ticked up a little bit, but overall, it's been about 1 out of every 4 jobs in this classification for several years, if not close to a decade now. There is, however, some unexpected growth occurring in occupations that are requiring an advanced degree. So as occupations shift from requiring a bachelor's degree to possibly a master's and or a doctorate level. So keeping in mind these color schemes that we have going here, so the green jobs of today, the reddish pink jobs of tomorrow, and the blue jobs of the future, another chart we like to share is our fastest growing occupations, because it is not uncommon for our office to be asked, what are the hot jobs in my area? And we always preface that with, well, how are you defining hot jobs? Because there's definitely a wide variety of ways we can look at statistical information. And a lot of folks know the old adage, you tell me what story you want to share and I'll give you the statistics to support it. And it is true. We can present data in very different ways and get very different outcomes. And this slide is a great example of that. So when we look at those hot jobs for a given area, we can look at it by 3 different criteria. The first is by volume growth. So which jobs are going to add the most occupations or jobs over the next 10 years? When we do that, we get the first column. And I've labeled that traditional because if you look at that, those are jobs that have been in the labor market for a long time. If you asked most people, they would have some idea of what those individuals do. It is things that people have heard of. And again, you'll see that breakout, the green jobs of today, the red jobs of tomorrow, and the blue jobs for the future or 4-year programs. There's a nice mixture of jobs when we look at that. So we have jobs in all 3 categories, meaning there are opportunities for individuals regardless of what their post K through 12 plans might be. When we shift focus and we look at percent growth or the fastest growing by change in employment, this is where we start to see maybe some emerging jobs, things that are smaller in volume. So therefore, if they're smaller in volume, any change that occurs increases that percentage rate a lot faster. You'll see there is a lot of healthcare related fields here and several IT or information technology related fields. There's a little less of a distribution here. You see there's only 1 job of tomorrow falling into this category, but we still do have a nice mix of jobs of today, people that can enter fresh out of high school, and jobs that will require some amount of educational experience. This is again where we tend to capture things that might be experiencing above average change or emerging in certain sectors. And then finally, the last thing to look at is this information by annual demand. And that's straight up, which of these jobs are we going to need the most people to complete? And you'll see the color scheme distribution tends to go away here. And that's not surprising. Everything in this category is a job of today. These are those foundational jobs that most of us have had some experience in at some point in our career path. They are often filled with either younger workers who are just dipping their toe into the labor market, or with older workers who have put in their 20, 25, 30, whatever number of years into their career and are now looking for something to keep themselves engaged, earn a little additional money, and not commit to that 35, 37 and a half or 40-hour plus work week. Obviously, these are jobs that are largely part-time in nature, and therefore, in order to fill 1 full-time equivalent, you often need more than 1 person, hence the increased demand. And I do apologize, I just noticed here the source on here, this is actually from our 2018 to 2028 projections as well. So it is that new data, not the previous set of employment that was provided or available. So to offset the occupational projections and looking at employment outlook, we now know whether or not an occupation is going to be in demand, what the employment educational expectations are. But now the reality comes down to, that's great, but how much money can I expect to earn? Oftentimes when we do a formal publication, which we will showcase in just a little bit, we tend to focus on the average annual or average hourly wage. And that's great. That is a good representation. It's a number that can be compared across occupations, but it needs to be kept in mind that that is not what somebody entering the field is going to make. So as you're working with individuals, job seekers, students who are exploring careers, you have to look at the whole scope of wages, not just that average wage. And that's why we do provide a variety of wage levels within our occupational wage publication. As you'll see, in addition to the average wage, we do include the entry wage, the experienced wage, and what we call the mid-range annual wage. And that mid-range is literally the middle 50% of all individuals working in that occupation. So if you're dealing with a student or you're dealing with a job seeker and they want an idea of how their wage may change over time, the mid-range is a great way to look at that and see, yeah, you might come in a little bit lower than another job you're considering, but the potential exists there for you to earn more over your entire time within that career. This information is released annually. It is usually dispersed by our center in April. So we are right in the middle of a cycle now. We have the 2020 data available. Our 2021 wages will be coming out next April. Much like our employment projections data, we do provide this information, collect it, and disseminate it through an agreement with our federal partners at the Bureau of Labor Statistics. This allows, once again, for comparison across your state borders. So if you happen to be in an area that is right next to a neighboring state, you may have individuals that are looking at jobs outside of Pennsylvania's borders. Other states have the same information. Within Pennsylvania, we also produce this information at sub-state areas. Again, those metropolitan statistical areas, workforce development areas that cover all 67 counties, and each individual county. Obviously, as you get to smaller and smaller geographies, the potential for information to have to be suppressed increases. As this information is collected from employers within the Commonwealth, our #1 priority is to make sure we do not disclose any information that identifies a single employer. So as you do look into, especially our smaller counties within the Commonwealth, you will notice that fewer and fewer occupations are actually available. However, we do have this information at all those different geographies so that hopefully you get something more localized than our statewide data. As I mentioned, again, this also uses those same standard occupational classification codes. So once you've identified occupations that are of interest to you, you can easily match our projections data to our occupational wage data and get that complete career outlook. So with that, I'm going to shift focus from the core data to actually some of the products that pull this data together. Some of you out there may have heard of our Pennsylvania in-demand occupation list, or the affectionately labeled PA EIDL. The goal of that PA EIDL list is to help focus career exploration to a subset of those 800 occupations. We know 800 occupations can be daunting. It's daunting for us, but having that information available to discuss with job seekers as they are making their career choices, they probably don't want to look through all 800 occupations. So our goal with the PA EIDL was to identify those careers that are in demand in Pennsylvania that have a high level of demand and or a high level of growth. We highlight career choices rather at all of those training levels. So again, those jobs of today, tomorrow, and future in terms of how much additional education will be required. Occupations only appear on this list if they meet all the demand and outlook criteria that are established and nothing is added to this list. The reason I bring this up, as career and technical education personnel and professionals, I'm sure you've also heard of the high priority occupation list. This is not the high priority occupation list, which is what we get into the next bullet here. Starting back in PY 2017, career and technical ed no longer uses the high priority occupation list for many of their connections. They use the PA EIDL. So things like equipment grant approvals, program evaluation, industry recognized credentials, according to our partners at the Pennsylvania Department of Education and through discussions we have had with them, are now being evaluated using the PA EIDL. That traditional high priority occupation list does come into play if you are a career and technical center that is working with the local Pennsylvania CareerLink office and getting primarily adult students into your programs using the eligible training provider list, or ETPL. So HPOs have not gone away entirely in the realm of career and technical ed, but the primary focus should be on the Pennsylvania in-demand occupation list. And for anyone who has not seen it, I did include just a few examples here. I had to put a break in there to show you the 3 different classifications, but you'll see there are jobs of today, tomorrow, and the future. We do list the educational expectation for that job, as well as the key information that relates to that occupation. And even though wages are not a factor in determining what makes this list, they are included because we do know that those are the 2 key data elements that individuals look for as they're evaluating careers. So in reality, the Pennsylvania EIDL, or PA EIDL, takes that list of about 800 occupations and pares it down to just around 250 or so occupations that are truly in demand within the state of Pennsylvania. Those are going to be the best opportunities for those that really have no idea where to start in terms of career exploration. Next, I wanted to share with you one of our more popular products, especially amongst our younger students, our job seekers who are just entering the job market for the first time, individuals who may have been with a career for an extended period of time and now find themselves having to search for employment. And that is our Pennsylvania Career Guide. This summer, we released the 26th edition of this document. The cover is shown there in case you have not seen it. We do have hard copies of this publication available. Within the document, there's a wide range of articles to help high school students, those looking at college, those who are wondering how to find support from their CareerLink offices or other state agencies, tips for individuals who are maybe older, have been in the job market for a while and now find themselves, kind of back out there looking for employment for the first time in quite some time. We also have information on budgeting, which was a big ad based on feedback we received from our customers. There's a very simple interest assessment test, which allows an individual to go through a 1-page series of questions. Do you like to do this? You fill in the circles, you get your interest code, and that points you toward occupations that are going to be a good fit for you or for the individual that you are working with. Once you have that information and you know what kind of jobs might be the best fit for you, the middle portion of this document is what we like to call our occupational data bank. It has a lot of that same occupational information that we've talked about earlier today. It highlights it for, again, somewhere between 200 and 300 different occupations. Gives you an idea not only of the wages, the outlook, the demand, but also some employer or industry groups where you might be able to find employment in that field. In addition to that wealth of information, we do include a few spotlight articles that have been very popular with K through 12, career and technical ed over the years. And those are articles for individuals who might not realize there are opportunities related to sports, things seen on TV, and the healthcare segment that may not be exactly what you think of when you hear those terms. So for instance, our sports article focuses on your odds of becoming a professional athlete. When you're in high school, a lot of people have those dreams of becoming a professional athlete. The reality is, unfortunately, most of them will not make it, but there are a lot of opportunities available related to professional sports that you may not have considered. So this article explores some of those. In a similar vein, either through television or movies, a lot of careers are spotlighted over these mediums. They tend to glorify what the occupation does, and it makes it seem like there may be a lot of these individuals. The reality is the employment opportunities may not be there. The occupation may not be as glorious as what is shown on television. So this article provides a little bit of that reality check so folks get an idea of whether or not they really can go into that field showcased in their favorite TV show or movie. And then finally, healthcare. Most people, when you mention healthcare, they think of doctors, nurses, people who are in those frontline interactions with patients. The reality is healthcare has a wealth of jobs available. If you don't like the sight of blood or you don't feel that you want to be interacting directly with patients, there are other opportunities within the healthcare industry that may be good opportunities for you to explore, because healthcare tends to be a pretty stable, if not growing industry. So the opportunities that exist today are expected to continue to exist in the future. Similar in vein to the career guide, we have a series of career posters available on our website. These are broken out into 12 industry clusters or groupings. They are available for the state and each workforce development area, and they highlight jobs that are more associated with the cluster than some of our other products. So for example, if you're looking at this education poster, you will tend to see more jobs that are directly related to education. We are currently in the process of updating these and plan to have updates available at the end of this year. But this is also something that can be very valuable, even if for nothing else, to have posted. It engages in conversation. It starts the discussion of whether or not an individual is ready to enter the workforce now, is considering a couple more years of schooling or certification, and then finally, if they're considering a 4-year degree, what their opportunities might be. And then the last thing I wanted to cover before we open it up for some questions and discussion, all of the information that we've been talking about is looking forward. It's based on what has happened within the Commonwealth and obviously has been influenced greatly by the impact of the pandemic. We know that things have changed. We know that certain industries have not gotten their feet back under them. Some occupations are still searching for workers. The online job postings dashboard that is available on our website allows you to get a real-time perspective of what is going on in terms of job postings available on the web. This can be used in conjunction with our other information. We strongly encourage that you do not use just one data set exclusively, because obviously what is happening now in terms of job postings may not be the case 2, 3, 4 years down the line. So if someone is considering an occupation that you find on the online job postings now, but it requires 2 years of schooling, you probably want to work with them to look at our longer term projections and make sure that those trends are expected to continue. Once again, we do have this information readily available on the website by workforce development area. We can also prepare it for the state as a whole. There are aggregations by industry, occupation. There's even specific data on employers who are posting, and we update this information monthly. So just to go a little bit into detail, and I'm not going to read through all of these, when you open the dashboard, what you'll see essentially looks like an upside down Excel spreadsheet. All the tabs are at the top and then the data is underneath of it. And there are tabs for each of these items that are shown here. I include this because you may not have, based on the title of the tab, an idea of what would actually be included on that information. So we include this here to give you an idea that we do look at things like which industries or occupations have far more postings than they did 1 year ago. Is there been an increase in full-time versus part-time job postings? We can look at information not only by occupation, but by occupation within a certain industry. There's a tab that actually includes for your local area what certifications are in highest demand. But the two that I like to focus on the most, and primarily the very last one, is the top industries and or occupations. And while this sounds similar to the first arrow pointing there for growing industries and occupations, the top occupations is simply looking at number of postings. So these are the ones that have the most postings overall. The growing industries or occupation is looking at those that have had the highest change year over year. So it is slightly different, and you do get slightly different occupations showing. With that, here is an example of that top occupation tab. It defaults so that all workforce development areas do show. Berks always shows up first because it is first alphabetically. If you select the drop down under workforce development area, you can deselect all of the areas rather, and just select the one that is of most interest to you. For each area, regardless of what you select, this is what you would see. So it'll include the occupational title, how many job postings there were in the current month, in this case, September 2021, and then how many job postings there were 1 year ago. It is not unsurprising that we tend to see the same types of occupations coming to the top of this list month after month. Registered nurses, truck drivers, these are always jobs that people are looking to fill. And that's something to keep in mind as you're looking and dealing with this information. Online job postings do not guarantee a job opening. So many employers like to post for jobs constantly to see what kind of interest they might glean. So you have to keep that in mind as you're looking at this, is some of this could just be employers constantly in need of workers, constantly looking for workers, which is why we do strongly suggest that you partner this with some of the other information readily available on our website. The other thing to keep in mind when looking at this information, we do show there a volume change. Just because something has fewer postings now than it did a year ago, it's something to consider. It does not mean that there is a contraction needed in terms of workers for that occupation. However, it's also not surprising when we see things like an increase of more than 100 for something like truck drivers. Anybody paying attention to the grocery store shelves, to any retail store establishment or the news in general, knows that there is a shortage of truck drivers right now, especially those who are certified to transport things like fuel that drive tanker trucks. So it's not surprising that we are looking for more and more truck drivers to move those products from point A to point B. With that, that is what I wanted to cover. I was hoping that that would generate a lot of questions on your part. We wanted to showcase for you not only some of the products that are readily available through the center, but also the data that goes into them. So with that, Lori, I don't know if maybe you can see if there's any questions.
Yes, I'm looking. I don't see anything coming in the question and answer. Does anybody have questions for Kim or comments to put in the chat? Okay, we have one. I would love to get a hard copy of the career guide.
Okay, that is a great question, and thank you. That's actually something I meant to address. We are more than willing to send out hard copies of the Pennsylvania Career Guide. You can feel free to email me directly. My information is there, or you can refer to the customer service email provided earlier within the PowerPoint. They would be able to connect that for you. We can send out any quantity of career guides that you'd be interested in. We do send in bulk by a box of 50 copies. So if you're looking to get copies for like an entire class, we will send up to 500 copies to a single location. But myself or the customer service email would be more than willing to help you out with that.
Great. And then I'm just posting now. I had a question about, is the presentation available? And Kim's PowerPoint is on the matrix. If you click on the resources link, you will see a link to her PowerPoint as well. And I have a question coming in. Can you explain the today, tomorrow, and future definitions again?
Sure, not a problem. So as you'll recall, early on in my presentation, I indicated that the federal partners indicate a minimum educational level for each occupation of those 800. And they range anywhere from short-term on-the-job training, which means an individual is prepared for that work within 1 month of actually doing the job, all the way up to things like a medical or a PhD or professional doctoral degree. The today, tomorrow, and future is just our way of lumping together the jobs that you can enter basically out of high school. So those would be your jobs of today. Those are going to be things that fall into the short or moderate term on the job training. Individuals looking at those jobs can basically expect to walk into them and be proficient within no more than a year of doing the work. The jobs of tomorrow are going to be those jobs that individuals can't enter until a few years into the future or tomorrow, because they require a formal certification, a completion of an apprenticeship, an associate's degree, something along those lines, where you're looking at about 1 to 3 additional years of some kind of post-secondary, either formal training or education through the employer themselves. And then finally, those jobs of the future are going to be those jobs that individuals can't enter until at least 4 years down the line. So those are going to be your bachelor's degree, your master's degree, and above jobs.
Okay, another question that came in is, what background do people in your department have to create such helpful data? For example, I've heard that being a data scientist is an up-and-coming job. I'm wondering if that role is one in your department.
That's a great question, and something we usually include on the Who Are We slide. Our organization consists of about 65 primarily statisticians. Most of the individuals in our office have either a degree in statistics or something math related that had a heavy influence on statistics. Because we are employees of the Commonwealth, our job classifications don't change quite as dynamically as the real world. So many of us still tend to fall into that statistical background. There are data scientists within the Commonwealth, and it is something that the Commonwealth is exploring. It is certainly something that our folks do, even if that's not what they're called. We do have individuals who run our survey programs that actually collect the data. Their primary focus is on, gathering the information from employers and making sure that it is statistically valid. We do have a lot of individuals who also combine that with a lot of IT skills to produce and run programs, work in Access or SAS or other programming languages to combine the data. And then ultimately we have individuals who take that combined data and prepare products, write analysis, prepare draft reports, things like that. So our primary focus and classifications are statisticians. However, we do have a mix of individuals with not only statistical backgrounds, but also some strong IT skills and a few people that are able to translate numbers into words.
Great. And Karen asked, you stated that CTE does not utilize the high priority occupation list anymore. For Perkins CLNA, we used HPO and IDOL, will that no longer be allowed?
It is our understanding, and you definitely want to verify with your connections at the Department of Education, Career and Technical Ed. But through our discussions with them, it was told to us that the only thing that high priority occupations are currently used for is if you are collaborating with the Pennsylvania Career Link and having individuals who come through the PA Career Link to attend your program and are therefore having their costs subsidized through the Pennsylvania Career Link. Everything else should have been transitioned over to the Pennsylvania In-Demand Occupation List, or PA EIDL. If something has not been, I would strongly suggest you reach out to the partners at PDE and get verification, and we will certainly do the same to make sure that nothing has changed that we were not made aware of.
And Alice is saying, Kim, in the earlier years of the PA Career Guide, there were also sample lesson plans of how that document might be used, where, etc. Are there any resources for counselors and teachers like that through you or other sources?
Yes, what's being referred to there is for a period of time, we had what was called our resource guide, partner to the Pennsylvania Career Guide. Unfortunately, the person who prepared those that had the connection to education has long since left our office. We don't have anybody on staff who is qualified to prepare those. We are always looking for partners. So if there is anybody out there that would be willing to work with us, we are more than willing to do that and to, you know, compile it into something useful. But at this time, we don't have the connections either to the Department of Education or an individual here within the center that had that connection to education to be in an authoritative position to prepare those.
Okay, a lot of thank yous coming through. Very well done presentation, very helpful. Great presentation. Not seeing any other questions coming through. Any other questions?
So while people are thinking about that, I'll just add that obviously it's a lot to take in. I much prefer doing these sessions in person so that I can actually see whether or not people are understanding, but I appreciate the other assets that a virtual presentation brings. If you think of anything after the fact, I have included my direct contact information here. I encourage you to reach out directly to me with any questions you might have. If it's something general, or if you're looking at our website, also don't forget we do have that customer service group. Unlike a lot of resource accounts within the Commonwealth, that is monitored daily by an actual human being. So they are pretty quick at getting a response back to you. Don't hesitate to reach out to either of us directly, and we'd be happy to help. We are also willing to, you know, have conversations directly. So if you're considering something in your area, you have a group of individuals you work with that could benefit from this similar information, we do sessions for smaller groups as well. So if that's something that would be of interest to you as you're exploring a specific project or just want general information like we presented here today, feel free to reach out to me and see if we can set up something to collaborate in that vein as well.